Welcome back to another Kray video. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss any videos. And for people really into the Krays, join our private Facebook group, Krays Crime Lords of London, where you will find stuff probably unavailable anywhere else. We're an established group with a large membership, and best of all, we're friendly. The link is in the YouTube description section.
And welcome back. Thank you for joining me. Ronnie had ways of making money. Often he just asked for it. A loan, a contribution, an investment, and since people were frightened of him, he invariably received a publican, a shopkeeper, an illegal bookmaker. Anybody who was vulnerable was likely to be tapped for 50 quid or a ton to pay for his evening out. One of his favorite methods was to pawn his big gold watch with a publican for £200, and a week later, to ask for the watch back. No one ever had the nerve to refuse him or demand repayment. This suited Ronnie as a means of money grabbing. It kept life simple and flattered his vanity. But there were better ways of making money. The twins knew all about capitalizing on violence. In the past, they had peddled it like any other commodity. This had been Reggie's speciality. If someone had needed hurting or protecting, if a business had to be wrecked or a club destroyed, Reggie had arranged the details like a professional providing any normal service. The twins invariably gave value for money. Ronnie gave clients something more: excitement. Some businessmen enjoyed sharing the twins' wildness. Ronnie cashed in on this. In the process, some of their friends acted extremely stupidly. Perhaps the stupidest of all was a man called Daniel Shay. In the summer of 1959, he owned his own car business and was living in an expensive flat in Edgware. He was not particularly honest. According to evidence later produced in court, he already had 13 convictions for various types of fraud, but he was not a dangerous man. Quite the reverse. Everyone who knew him found him charming, perhaps a little too easy to do business with, and rather kind. He lived well, gambled, but not to excess, and was devoted to his wife. Then he met Ronnie Kray and began boasting of his friendship with the twins. This suited Ronnie. He never minded businessmen using his name, provided they paid for the privilege. Shay paid. On several occasions, Ronnie borrowed from him, and the money never seemed to be returned. Then Shay began to change. This friend of the twins began to think that he could act as they did. By then, Ronnie was earning a considerable income each week from shopkeepers he protected. At the beginning of February 1960, kindly Mr. Shay did something out of character. At the Hampstead end of the Finchley Road was a small shop called Swiss Travel Goods, run by a Pole called Murray Podro. Shay had already met him playing cards, and when he called at the shop and chose a briefcase, leaving his card and saying he would pay later, Podro allowed him to take it. A few days later, Shay returned, bringing the twins and telling Mr. Podro that he had taken a diabolical liberty, overcharging him for the briefcase. He grabbed him, hit him, and demanded £100, otherwise he would be cut to pieces. It was a bungling attempt. Shay was no gangster, and as soon as he left the shop, Podro telephoned the police. 2 days later, Shay returned to collect his money. He brought Reggie with him As they entered the shop, they walked straight into the police. At the Old Bailey, Shay was romantically described as running a Chicago-style protection racket and sentenced to 3 years imprisonment. Reggie got 18 months. Ronnie was never mentioned, with Reggie stuck in Wandsworth prison and Ronnie in command. The rampage started. The Double R lost money. The firm was finally his private army. Fort Valence was stocked up with arms. Nothing else mattered now except the little wars. The colonel was convinced that he would soon rule London through the rattle of machine guns and the blood of rivals flowing in the streets. He was quite happy. Reggie was safe behind bars. No women could reach him there. Charlie did not worry him. No one interfered with the strange war game he was playing. As he gathered information, planned his next moves, and prepared to lead his fighting men to battle. He lived at home with Violet and had all he needed. Life would have continued from one battle to the next, but for what happened that autumn. Ronnie met Peter Rachman. Rachman was not notorious yet as the extortionate West London landlord making his unsavory fortune from his rack-rented tenants. But he was thick with money and was vulnerable. This made him interesting to Ronnie, who had heard about him in Paddington. He tried to meet him. Rachman avoided him, but finally, through Dickie Morgan, who worked for Rachman, Ronnie and several friends gate-crashed a party Rachman was giving at the old Latin Quarter Club in Soho. It was a memorable occasion. Rachman had begun the evening in high spirits. Everyone was laughing at his table. When Ronnie entered, Rachman and the girls tried to ignore him. Ronnie and his friends wore dinner jackets, sat at a table, and simply stared at Rachman. None of them spoke or drank. Slowly, the conversation died. When Peter Rachman went downstairs, there was a scuffle by the door. Several Kray men joined in. Ronnie Kray yawned, said nothing, and waited as the sound of fighting came up the stairs. Then Dickie Morgan came up to him, grinning, and whispered in his ear. Ronnie nodded and stumped from the room. Downstairs, Rolls was waiting, Rachman at the wheel. As Ronnie came from the club, Rachman opened the door and asked where he was going. Valence Road, he grunted, and heaved himself in beside Rachman. He had his meeting. There were no polite preliminaries as the colonel delivered his terms. £5,000 immediately. Otherwise, his men would be in Notting Hill every night of the week and drive Rachman's rent enforcers off the streets. Rachman should know that he could put him out of business in a month. At Valence Road, Rachman was invited in to meet Violet, and afterwards to discuss things over tea in the upstairs sitting room. Rachman had considerable charm, thanked Violet for the tea, called Ronnie by his first name, and made no difficulties when his host demanded an initial down payment. He had £250 on him in cash and wrote a cheque for £1,000. They parted on good terms. Next morning, the cheque bounced. When Ronnie heard, he drew a Luger from the armory and went in search of Rachman. He had vanished. Trouble began in Notting Hill, exactly as the colonel prophesied. Rachman's rent collectors were methodically beaten up. Rachman's whole empire, which depended on intimidation of tenants, faced its one real time of crisis. Rachman had made the mistake of underestimating Ronnie, thinking that he would never have the skill or organization to upset his business. Now that Ronnie proved he had, something needed to be done. Rachman was a clever man. One thing he knew about was intimidation, and he knew that the more he tried to buy off Ronnie Kray, the more he would have to pay later. Much money was at stake, rich, influential people's money as well as his own. He had no intention of risking it for Ronnie Kray. What he needed was something big to offer Ronnie as a final payment that would divert him from Notting Hill for good. Someone suggested Esmeralda's barn. On a fine autumn evening in 1960, a man called Stefan de Fay walked along Kensington Gore for an appointment with a retired naval commander at an address behind the Royal Albert Hall. De Fay was a tall, excitable man and was in something of a state. He knew that in the next hour or so, he would have to make one of the most uncomfortable decisions of his life. He was a club owner, moderately rich, entirely honest and extremely smart. In his youth, he had written a book entitled Profitable Bar Management. And recently, he had secured control of the most promising gaming club in London. It was the sort of chance that comes once in a lifetime, being shrewd. Stefan de Fay had done his best to keep it to himself. Not too successfully, or something had leaked out. There had been threats. Finally, an invitation came from a certain ex-naval commander. De Fay knew all about him. He was a front man for a number of figures in the underworld. If he refused his invitation, there would be less polite approaches later. Had de Fay been a gangster or a gambler, he might have risked this, as he was neither. He continued walking down Kensington Gore until he found the address he wanted. He rang the bell. The commander, a smiling gentleman with bright, false teeth, answered the door and led de Fay into a long, brown sitting room. 3 men were waiting. "Mr. de Fay," said the commander, "my good friend, Leslie Payne." A big man with pale hair and blue eyes rose and shook hands. "And these are the Kray twins, Reginald and Ronald. You'll find them very useful friends to have." Introductions made, the commander departed. Business started. The twins both smoked and remained silent. The man called Payne did the talking, softly and with a hesitant, apologetic charm. It was as if he hated having to tell de Fay how much he knew. He was extremely accurate. He had the whole story of his club, called Esmeralda's Barn. It was in Wilton Place, and had enjoyed a period of success as a nightclub for the bright young things of the early 50s. Cy Grant was among the performers, the young Duke of Kent among the guests. What a waste to let a place like this go to seed. How very smart of Mr. de Fay and his friends to see its possibilities now that the Gaming Act was law. The club looked very good. And with roulette and 4 chemi tables in operation, they should be clearing. The big man paused, then named a figure so near the mark that de Fay could only nod in agreement. This was not all that Payne knew about the place. Somehow he had gleaned details of the unusual company structure controlling it. He knew that there were 4 principal shareholders drawing profits from the gambling. He also knew the fact that caused Mr. de Fay so much concern: that Esmeralda's Barn was controlled in turn by a holding company called Hotel Organization Limited. Hotel Organization had one effective shareholder, Stefan de Fay. As Payne explained this, both twins smiled. Payne's proposition was eminently reasonable. He had heard that Mr. de Fay was no great gambler. Why not exchange his vulnerable position for hard cash? In the long run, it would save a lot of worry. Payne was offering £1,000 down. The sale could take place at once, with a simple entry in the company minutes. It would be perfectly legal and would not affect Defay and the two other directors, who could keep their directorships and profits from the barn. Once Defay relinquished his control, he would be surprised what a weight would be off his mind. If he decided not to, Leslie Payne made no reply, but looked towards the twins. Stefan Defay decided to take his £1,000. Leslie Payne is a key figure at this point in the rise of the twins, and it was natural for Ronnie to go to him for advice when Rachman offered the information about Stefan Defay's controlling interest in Esmeralda's barn. Reggie had only just come out of Wandsworth on bail after 9 months of his sentence. Thanks to the skill of his lawyers and a dispute about the evidence on which he had been convicted, his case had been reopened. In the meantime, he was a free man. While he had been away, Payne had become Ronnie's own personal advisor, fixer, frontman, and father figure. When Ronnie put his faith in anyone, the trust was total while it lasted. Health, finance, sex life, business, law, whatever Ronnie's problem, and whatever time of day or night. Checker Berry would be sent off in Ronnie's car, and Leslie Payne, the omniscient man with the briefcase, brought back to Valence Road to confer. And yet, in many ways, Payne was a most unlikely man to have been mixed up with the Krays. A cultured, humorous man with a sharp brain, a very pretty wife, and 2 small daughters, all living cosily in a house in Dulwich. But Les Payne and the twins saw something that they thought they needed in each other. At that time, Payne was a bankrupt, and had watched something like 14 of his associated companies float off into liquidation. He could see the twins' potential from the start. For Ronnie, who was often morbidly unsure of himself, Payne had the poise, the confidence, and inside knowledge that he lacked. Some called him Payne the Brain. At about 10 o'clock that evening, Stefan Defay met Payne and the twins, and the new proprietors of Hotel Organisation Limited drove to Wilton Place to see their property. Everything had been legally tied up and signed. Payne didn't make mistakes. It was an interesting evening, interesting for the twins, who gazed with mounting avarice and awe as the earliest of the night's gamblers seated themselves at the rich bays of the tables and the chips began travelling. Interesting for the club's manager and principal shareholder, who was waiting to meet the night's big punters, ignorant of what had happened. Most interesting of all for Leslie Payne, who held the company Minutes of Hotel Organisation Limited under his arm and was waiting for a good moment to tell the manager and his co-directors that they had new partners. Payne did it very well. Nothing disturbed the ritual of the gaming room as he informed the manager that the ownership of his club had changed for good. The manager showed no emotion as he glanced at Defay's signature and casually remarked that he would fight the legality of the deal to the last lawyer in the land. "Of course," said Payne, who had a pleasant smile for such occasions. "By all means try." But he hardly thought that it would do much good. He had consulted the best company lawyers in London already. He looked around him at the small bar, the softly lighted gaming room, the restaurant where club members could eat well through the night, the roulette wheel in the ante-room. The place was filling fast now, and he called a waiter, ordered a bottle of champagne, told him to put it on his account, and asked his 2 friends what they'd like to drink. The club seemed heading for success. It had been quicker off the mark than any other club when the new Gaming Act legalized gambling and had maintained its lead. Croupiers were still scarce. Esmeralda's barn had the best in London. Gamblers were an unknown quantity, but the manager's personal friends, rich London restaurant owners, were the one group who played big and always met their debts. The address was perfect. This was the gold mine that the twins suddenly found they had a stake in. Payne and his lawyers soon restructured the business side of the barn. Defay's name stayed on the directors' list for 2 more years, but he never appeared and never collected a penny. The two junior directors were eased out, while the manager, the mainstay of the club and the one man to have invested real money in it, stayed on with a 50% stake in the profits. Payne and the twins absorbed the rest. During the first few months, the twins made no great difference to the running of the club. For both of them, it was a new toy. They had identical dark blue dinner jackets, made in Savile Row, and would arrive shortly before midnight, drink, order a steak in the restaurant, then watch the money roll in. There were 3 chemi tables, each with 9 players, operating from 11 p.m. until 3 a.m., each player paid at the rate of £3 per shoe to the house. From then to 6 a.m., shoe money rose to £6 each. After 6 a.m., it rose to £10. A good croupier takes roughly 4 minutes for a shoe. The senior croupier did it in less. Shoe money was straight profit to the house. When the twins came, the barn was drawing something over £10,000 a week from the tables. This meant that thanks to Rachman, the twins suddenly possessed assured incomes of something like £40,000 each a year, with nothing to do for them except wear dark blue dinner jackets. Just before Christmas, Reggie's appeal against conviction in the Kray case failed. Despite the efforts of his lawyers, he went back to Wandsworth for the following 6 months. Ronnie was left to make the most of wealth and Esmeralda's barn alone. He enjoyed sitting in the bar at night, knowing that people wondered who he was. He enjoyed the money. He enjoyed the sense of ownership. But there was nothing in the whole club for him to do. Had there been, he might have learned just how delicate a business big-time gambling can be. He never did learn this. He was a villain, not a bank clerk. He hated gambling and despised the rich. He was incapable of sitting back and accepting £800 a week for doing nothing. For Ronnie, there was something wrong with money that was not dishonestly acquired. He had to have a racket of his own, not for the money. He had more than enough. But racketeering was a habit and a way of life. He could feel superior to those he cheated. Soon, he was nipping the cashier for small amounts and fleecing the occasional client. Then he found something neater. It was exactly what he wanted, since it enhanced his sense of private power. Like any gambling club, Esmeralda's barn was obliged to pay winnings straight away and bear any losers' checks that bounced. Success depended on keeping the margin of dud losers' checks to a minimum. The manager was extremely strict over the credit he would grant within the club. Ronnie was different. Whenever the manager was away or off duty, Ronnie, as a director, had the right to say who should have credit. He began granting it quite freely, seeing that it placed the gambler firmly in his debt. If the man won, Ronnie had done him a favor and would expect a good commission in return. If he lost, the house might have to carry the bad check. Ronnie would settle privately for whatever he could recover. Provided Ronnie could scare the man into paying him a few pounds, he would be satisfied. The manager soon saw what was happening when checks marked "Return to draw" flooded the office. When they came to over £2,000 in 1 week, he mentioned it to Ronnie. Ronnie laughed. Why should the manager worry when there was more play than ever across the tables? The manager tried explaining that no club could carry such losses. As a last gesture, he offered the twins £1,000 a week to stay away. Reggie was still in Wandsworth. Ronnie replied that they weren't interested. So the manager, good gambler that he was, saw that the time had come to cut his losses. forget the money he had invested in the club, and place his bets elsewhere. He was scrupulously polite to Ronnie. He could afford to be. When he set up his new club in Curzon Street, his richest clients followed. The checks no longer bounced. Today, his club remains what Esmeralda's barn would have been, one of the 4 top gambling clubs in London. The twins could still have had a permanent share of the profits. At the time, nobody worried. If the manager left, so much the better. His share of profit could now go to Leslie Payne and the twins. They had to bring a new manager in to run the gambling, but he had no say over credit. If something like £15,000 of bad checks piled up in the cashier's office during the 6 months, who cared? Play was increasing all the time. What Ronnie really wanted was a plushier version of the billiard hall, a headquarters where he could come on show with his following and be himself before an audience. This seemed impossible at first. Everybody in the barn appeared so confident and rich. But Ronnie despised them. There's such a lot of crybabies, frightened of what their old man will say when he finds out what they've been up to. So when they're in a mess, they come crawling. They'll do anything then to save themselves, even pretend to like you. But they're not sincere like East End people. When it comes to it, they always let you know your place. The chip on his shoulder showed, and the urge to humiliate was irresistible. Thank you very much for watching. That brings this episode to an end. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you in the next one.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please join our Facebook group. It's called Krays Crime Lords of London. We're a friendly moderated group with over 1,000 Kray and other celebrated gangster videos available for view. There's also thousands of images in the photos sections. The link for the group is in the YouTube description section.